What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another War Within video. Hope you're doing very well. Finally going to do a tier list for the range DPS in the War Within in Season 2. I meant to do this a lot earlier, but things just kept changing, and I was trying to get all the information correct, and so now I'm finally going to do it. With that in mind, there are two of the latest patch notes that I'm going to be talking about and referencing here. Just keep in mind that there are big changes that have happened, but we are going to do a tier list for the ranged DPS in the War Within in Season 2. To the best of my knowledge, I'm going to try to give you guys the best tier list that I can here. Remember, you know, if you're really good at a particular spec or a particular class, you can usually outshine basically what anybody says about it. There are very few of these classes that I think would be unable to accomplish some very serious goals for Mythic Plus and for Raid if you wanted to. That being said, there are some massive nerfs that have come through for certain classes. Let me put this in the middle for a sec. The latest patch notes that happened a few days ago had Augmentation Evoker getting absolutely put in the dumpster. If you've been watching any of the YouTube videos over the past like 4 or 5 days, you will know that most people are saying Augmentation Evoker is dead in Season 2. That has happened before. People have said that before. But this closest Clutch Mage thing is a really big deal. Not to mention, they've been nerfed a couple times in a row. So Augmentation Evoker got nerfed 2 patches ago, and now it's getting nerfed again, but this is the big one. So for right now, we don't know because the season hasn't started, but I'm going to put Augmentation Evoker pretty low on this list just as a TLDR. Devastation got buffed. BM got nerfed as well. I'll show you the implications of that in a minute. Marksman got buffed. We're going to keep all that in the back of your head when we're ranking these guys, okay? When we are beginning to rank them. So we are going to start with Boomkin. Yo, I really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe on the video. I gotta get some coffee. Bye. So we got Boomkin here. I'm gonna put Boomkin right away into the A+ category, and I think that this is something that you know, Tettles would be like rolling over if he saw this. But Kalamazzi actually did a recent video, and he talked about this as well, and really feels like Boomkin is actually much better than some people seem to think it is. In my opinion, the experience that I've had on the PTR testing this in pretty high level keys, +12s and stuff, is that Boomkin has done is doing very, very well. They have a lot of AoE damage with Starfall. They're always going to have that, right? You can see they're pumping right here. I'm just showing you this small clip, even though we're all about to die, but their mass AoE damage is still some of the best in the game, okay? Very, very good mass AoE damage. And then they still have decent single target damage too. I actually, on the boss fights, some of the boss fights in here, they were doing really well. But you see, once again, we don't even have Bloodlust rolling right now, and he's back up to 10 million. So I think that Boomkin is going to be very good damage-wise. If we go to the single target boss fight, it's coming up right about here. So we go to the wolf here, or the dog, sorry, Cujo. So at the very beginning of Cujo, we do have Bloodlust that comes up. I think we pop it here. I'm not sure if he actually pops it or not, but the Boomkin is slapping. You know, he's doing 3. He gets up to 4 million here, almost over 4 million, I think. Yeah, there's Bloodlust. 4.5 million. Single target DPS. Now, he apparently did not understand how to do the Cujo fight, so he ends up dying here in a second to Venting Flames. But I would just say their damage to me seems really good. And if we also look at the talent trees, this is really cool. So the class tree, sorry, is what I want to say. The class tree has changed dramatically from Season 1 to Season 2. Season 2, you're getting things like improved Sunfire just being baked right into your class. So you don't have to take it as a talent point anymore. You don't have to go down this left side and grab like Frenzy Regeneration and Iron Fur just to get to Thick Hide. You can just take Rejuve here. You can get the Remove Curse if you want to. You can get Verdant Heart. And then you can go down and get Thick Hide. So you don't have to take Frenzy Regen. You don't have to take Iron Fur. You can if you still want to for bear form stuff, but they've added in some new Asenia's renewal. This is like a passive renewal, which is really cool. It feels like the options that you have on the class tree now are much better, especially defensively speaking, right? You can grab Ursul's plus Typhoon, and then we still have another. I guess I'll grab Stamp Roar. You get your Light of the Sun right here. This is your remaining cooldown on Solar Beam. You have to right now. You have to take that in the spec tree, but that's gone. They've removed that, so you get an extra point in the spec tree if you probably weren't taking that talent anyway. You get some extra magic damage here, which is really cool. I mean, that was kind of already there. They've just reshuffled it. But mostly it's the defensive stuff where you can get down to perfectly honed instincts and oak skim, and you can grab Ursine's Vigor if you want to. You can get Innervate for your healer. You could do Symbiotic Relationship. This is this new kind of thing. It doesn't actually do that much healing, but it's there anyway. You get Nature's Vigil for some extra off healing, which is very strong on Boomkin, actually. It's almost close to like Vampiric Embrace. And you still have 1 point left. You could grab Movement Speed, which is a great, I think this is really valuable, 15% MS. So the class tree for me makes Boomkin in a much better spot than it is in Season 1. The damage is really solid. Their utility is, of course, very good. You bring a versatility buff. You've got Solar Beam. It's an amazing AoE kick, right? You've got a Battle Res. So I would say Boomkin, to me, is looking quite good, and I would put it in the A+ category for sure. Okay, let's talk about the Evokers. So Devastation Evoker, I honestly, the problem with Devastation Evoker right now is that I've literally never seen a single one in any of my PTR keys. And I think that I've looked at other streamers like Kalamazi and Yoda was talking about this. It's a similar problem that they haven't really seen any Devastation Evokers anywhere. So it's not necessarily that they're going to be bad. I just don't know. I would say they probably go in the B tier for now. Again, they have received buffs. Devastation got a 4% all damage buff 2 patches ago, and then they got a 6% all damage buff 1 patch ago. So their stocks are definitely up because they're getting all these buffs, and because Augmentation Evoker, as I'm going to put in the C tier, I really think Augmentation Evoker is struggling. They have received massive nerfs, as I said at the beginning. They've been nerfed for 2 patches in a row, actually, and this is the big one here. So I think that because Aug is way down, there's a very good chance that Devastation could come up. Realistically speaking, though, what's going to happen is that the compositions that you're going to get in Mythic Plus are now going to get a 3rd DPS, and I don't think that Devastation Evoker just automatically fills that 3rd spot. And we're going to talk about compositions in a minute when I get there. But for Devastation and for Augmentation Evoker, unfortunately, I don't have any information on them, but I do know from the patch notes that Aug is down bad, and Devastation is definitely up. I just don't know how far up it actually is, and whether or not it's actually better than a lot of the other range specs that are here. So for now, I'm going to put these guys down here. Okay, let's talk about BM Hunter. Let's start with BM. I'm going to actually put BM in the A+ category. Now, they did receive a nerf, as I said before, right? 8% all damage reduced. Even in the patch before that, they also got some small nerfs. So just be aware of that. But a lot of people have been talking about BM Hunter. Like, they were S tier for sure at the beginning. In the PTR testing cycle a few weeks ago, and now they've been brought down to probably A+ tier. A lot of people think that they could go even lower, and my thoughts on this, the argument is always that BM Hunter only ever brings damage, and my argument against this would be that they actually bring a lot of offensive combat utility aimed towards the enemies. Do they bring an aura buff? No, they don't. So their value, I think, goes down in the minds of people that are trying to do high Mythic Plus keys. The value goes down on a BM Hunter because they don't have like an aura buff. They don't have any like extra off healing that they could bring, like let's say a Shadow Priest or a Boomkin. They don't have a versatility buff like a Boomkin, or a stamina buff or a mastery buff like Shaman. So what they do have, though, is amazing crowd control against enemies, in my opinion. You have things like Binding Shot. In the last boss of Priory of Sacred Flame, there are like ads that come up to the top platform. If they auto-attack you, you die. Like if you get hit once or twice, you're dead. You can Binding Shot a bunch of them, keep them in place, and nuke them down. Very, very valuable. You can tar trap all those ads as well that are trying to get to you because they're like fixated, right? You have a single target stun. You have an AoE knockback with Bursting Shot. You have a single target in cap, which is really good. You can stealth past packs just like a mage or a rogue can. You've got an AoE knock-up or an AoE knock-back. You have misdirections, so you never take any there's never any aggro problems, and you have a trank shot to get rid of enrage effects or magic effects. I mean, there's a lot of utility here that I would argue is actually making Hunter in general very, very strong. They don't have an aura buff. They don't have a lot of extra like healing and stuff like that. I get that. But in my opinion, I don't think they should go lower than an A+, because their damage is kind of outrageous. And if we look right here, you can see some of that damage in action. This is before the nerfs. So this is pre-nerfs. So this is going to go down by about 8%. So just keep that in mind. But their damage is consistently good pack to pack to pack. That's the other potential problem with BM Hunter, I guess, is that their upfront burst is maybe not as high as some other classes, which is potentially valuable in higher Mythic Plus keys. They also don't necessarily have any form of like funnel, which is something that, let's say, like a Fire Mage would have, or a Sub Rogue would have really good funnel, that kind of thing. So Yeah, even Ele Shaman could have a bit of fun if they're playing Echoes of the Great Sundering, but you can see their damage is outrageous, so it needed to come down a little bit. They're going to do 8% less damage than what you're seeing right here, but they are still going to be strong, in my opinion. Just don't pay attention to me. This is early days of Marksman Hunter. I think Marksman Hunter's a lot better than this. I'll show you in a minute. But BM Hunter, in my opinion, is probably the best hunter spec right now. I think that it is deserving to be an A+. It is quite strong right now, even with the 8% nerf. If you still want to play it, it's still going to be powerful. Just know that you are going to be suffering a little bit with the damage reduction. Okay, let's talk about MM Hunter then. Obviously the brother to BM Hunter. TLDR, I think that MM Hunter is actually a lot better than people think. I think it deserves to go to A. A lot of people would have it in like B or C, honestly, but I think they're just not understanding some of the changes that have come through, and I've spent a lot of time testing this on the PTR now. One thing that's happened is that their entire spec tree has completely changed. It's completely different now. The way everything is structured, it looks kind of like this right now. You got these different lines right here, and then if we switch to 11.1, you will see everything is going to look a lot different in this tree. So volley's down here now. Like literally everything moved. A bunch of things got removed. A bunch of things got pruned. Their entire the way that MM Hunter plays the game now is fairly similar, but the buffs that you're getting and the way you think about your aim shot and stuff is completely different. So I experimented with a ton of different builds, and I think that MM Hunter is actually in a pretty good place. I think it deserves to go into the A category, and part of the reason for that is that their burst damage is just very, very good. That has not changed at all. We got double tap back, which is a very fun talent, works very well with volley, and the upfront burst damage is awesome. You get a whole bunch of quality of life now as well. You don't have to dismiss your pet anymore to press Bloodlust. You just get to press Bloodlust. You get a damage reduction as well from the pet that you would have had. You did lose Fortitude of the Bear. I've talked about this before. You're definitely losing that defensive cooldown, which sucks. But in place of it, you get 3% damage reduction all the time as a Marksman Hunter, which is actually pretty insane. I know there's lots of classes that would love to have that. So you still have 2 charges of your Survival of the Fittest. You still have Exhilaration to heal you. You have a lot of other really cool utility things like Turtle to stop one-shots, and then of course Feign Death to stop being channeled on. There are a lot of channels in this key. Now this is the same as BM Hunter, so I'm not going to say that it's only a Marksman Hunter thing, but I will say for hunters in general, once again, their utility is actually quite strong, and I use a lot of it in these dungeons. I've been testing a ton of it. Been using my single target stun with Intimidation, which you get for free as well. Again, you don't have to have a pet out for that. Obviously, you could do that before by taking an extra talent on the class. You don't have to do that anymore, which is really nice. You have your Binding Shot. You've got a lot of really good things, I think, which make Hunter valuable when it comes to enemy CC. I would say it rivals basically a Shaman in terms of how much crowd control you can have over the enemy pack. It's really good. But the damage is good. I think that people are not understanding how to build Marksman Hunter now, and then what stats to prioritize, because haste has now become a much, much more important stat, in my opinion, than it was in Season 1. In Season 1, you got a bunch of sources of haste from Rapid Fire and Steady Shot, and you don't get those anymore. So I think you have to build haste yourself to proc lock and load, and then if you can do that, you're going to end up doing a ton of extra damage. And I think Marksman Hunter, in a lot of the experiences that I've had, is really fantastic damage-wise, except for 2-target cleave. It still suffers in 2-target cleave big time, which is why I don't think it should ever be S or A+ tier, but I think it deserves to be in the A tier. That's where I'm going to put it. Okay, let's do mages. We're going to talk about Arcane Mage. Unfortunately, I don't think I've literally seen a single Arcane Mage on the PTR. I just haven't. So, and that has been echoed by a lot of other people that I've been watching too, who've been doing videos with tier sets. They just haven't seen a lot of Arcane Mage. They haven't seen a lot of love in the notes either. The last 2 patch notes have had literally nothing on Arcane Mage, except for the fact that Arcane Echoes impact now visuals, caster, whatever. That's nothing, right? So I'm going to end up throwing Arcane Mage into the B tier. It's mostly because I don't have information on it. So don't think that this means that it's really terrible. I genuinely just don't really have a lot of information on it. So that's where it's going to end up going for now. Okay. Now, if we talk about the other 2 mages, if we're going to look at Fire Mage, for example, I think Fire Mage actually deserves to go into the S tier category. And I think that this is probably the one mage that deserves to go up here. Fire Mage is absolutely cranking in a bunch of the different keys that I have been doing. multiple times. You know, it's doing lots and lots of damage. This is just a 2-target cleave boss fight, and it's doing 3 million. It's just crushing everybody else. This was me trying a really bad Marksman Hunter build once again, but you're going to see a lot of that. But Mage, Fire Mage, in my opinion, and I think this is kind of echoed by a lot of the rest of the community right now on the PTR, it has been slapping. It is the best performing Mage of the bunch. It has a little bit of extra utility as well with things like Cauterize, which is really nice, but Mage is always really good to bring, right? You've got the intellect buff. You've got the mobility from Fire Mage, which is really good. You have really strong shields and defensives like Mirror Image and Greater Invisibility and Alter Time, which I think is the best defensive in the entire game probably, unless you're getting one shot. So I think Fire Mage, of course, brings all of the mage stuff, which is fantastic, and you probably need that in your composition, your high-end compositions for sure, and it also brings the damage. So, yeah, I think that it's quite strong in the current season. In this opening pack, I think he ends up at the top of the meters there. We pull a bunch of AoE. So in AoE and single target, it's performing quite well. And I would say Fire Mage is looking to be probably the best mage of the bunch. I would put it in S tier confidently. And I would say that it deserves to be there. Now, Frost Mage. Again, I've literally not seen a single Frost Mage in my keys, but they have received a lot of different buffs, and they really, the way that they do their damage hasn't changed that much. They're still doing really strong AoE damage. The Blizzard Frozen Orb combos are still there. They're very strong. I think they deserve to go in the A tier from a lot of the information that I've grabbed from the rest of the internet. I think this is a safe place to put Frost Mage. The A+ tier, I think they deserve to go there. This could be in the meta comp. It's just not as good as Fire Mage damage-wise, but it has all the rest of the same utility that Mage has. So it's really solid that way, but this is potentially interchangeable. If you're not very good at playing Fire Mage, but you're really good at playing Frost Mage, then Frost Mage is going to be fantastic and is going to be close to being in like the Mythic Plus comp, if you know what I'm saying, for Season 2. I think it definitely deserves to be in the A+ tier. So there you go. Those are the mages done and dusted. Okay, let's talk about Shadow Priest. Unfortunately for Shadow Priest, there's been like literally no patch notes ever. There's never any patch notes talking about Shadow Priest, except we finally got something yesterday or 2 days ago. They did get a buff, but they also got a nerf. So Shadow Priest just can't catch a break. They got a 13% all damage buff, but then their tier set got nerfed, and their tier set represented a good chunk of their damage from what I understand. I think around 30% potentially. So what I'm understanding from what I'm hearing from people is that this is like a net neutral change or a small buff to their AoE damage. So it's nice to get that, but it's kind of dumb that they also nerfed the tier set bonus as heavily as they did. Obviously, you don't want Shadow Priest being entirely reliant on their tier set bonus to do damage for them, but it would have been nice to not also get a nerf. Now, Void Weaver is getting some love. Void Blast up by 25%, and then you've got Collapsing Void damage up, and then the damage to Vampiric Touch, Shadow Repaint going up. So that's nice. It's really nice to get those buffs going there. But when it comes to their damage, how are they looking in Season 2? Well, they're looking fine, I would say. Let me back this up. Sorry. We got to back way up to the beginning. I think that, like, Shadow Priest scales very, very, very well into the later part of an expansion, right? Secondary stats are super good for Shadow Priest. Mastery, as you can scale that, starts to go really hard for them because you end up usually having at least 2 dots on everything, and then sometimes 3 when you're spreading your Devouring Plagues around, and then your damage gets amplified per dot that's on them. You get quite a bit of damage going off there, which is really nice. The tier set bonus is pretty cool. It procs a Void Bolt for you. That Void Bolt will extend your dots, of course, which is very nice quality of life. It kind of, sort of helps to bridge the gap between your Shadow Crashes. I know a ton of Shadow Priests are kind of crying out that they would really love to have multiple charges of Shadow Crash. I understand. I totally get that. This tier set bonus, plus the fact that you're probably going to play Void Eruption rather than Dark Ascension, it really does help to keep your dots rolling for a long time, which means you don't have to like worry too much about the second Shadow Crash coming down, because as you can see here, my Shadow Crash is off cooldown and all my dots are still rolling, and I can throw Shadow Crash again and get more dots rolling on those mobs. So now I have like 10, 12 dots out instead of 8. So there is going to be, I think, this sense of ramping up for Shadow Priest. Whether or not you're going to play Void Weaver now over the Halo build, over Archon, like, I don't think that is going to happen, even with the Voidweaver buffs, but maybe. I wasn't able to test it because the changes that have come to 13% damage stuff, they're not live yet. So this is without the changes that I mentioned earlier. But on the whole, Shadow Priest to me looked and felt great. I mean, look at all the spirits pouring out of me. I mean, look at this. Ding, ding, ding. You get all these extra void bolts. Void bolts will send shadowy apparitions. There's definitely going to be like a shadowy apparition build, I think, that you could run. Maybe the value of crit is going to go up because if you crit, you get more apparitions. I don't know. But the point is, there's a lot of damage there actually from Shadow Priest. It's pretty good. And their utility is insane, right? They have, look at all my shadowy apparition damage there. Their utility is insane. You have PI, you have Mind Soothe. Those are massive, massive things. You have Mass Dispel to help your team if you want as well. So you're always going to have that utility. Now, Disc Priest did get nerfed, but they're still very, very strong. They're probably the second best healer now in the meta. So unless Discipline Priest gets nerfed again, Shadow Priest stonks are kind of a little bit lower. That's always the way that it goes, right? You have to live in the shadow of Discipline Priest. So we'll see. We'll see how good Shadow can actually end up being. I think it deserves to go into the A tier, the A+ tier, actually. I think this is actually very close to being meta. The only problem for Shadow Priest, in my opinion, is that Discipline Priest exists, and it's probably going to be meta. So, but on its own merits, Shadow Priest is doing very well, okay? So I would not sleep on this. This thing is doing very well. Okay, let's look at Ele Shaman. Ele Shaman is something that I have personally played a lot, and I'm a big fan of it. Really enjoyed it a lot. I think it also deserves to go into this A+ tier category. I actually think BM Hunter could probably go here. So I think these guys are all very similar in power when it comes to why I'm ranking them in the A+ category. I think they deserve to be here. I think that any one of these could make their way probably into a meta comp, depending on, because Evoker again is probably out. Yeah, so Ele Shaman, of course, is a shaman. It brings the mastery buff. You're going to have lots of AoE crowd control against enemies. You have off healing. Actually, you're losing your off healing, so that does suck. You're losing ancestral guidance, which is kind of a big deal, probably for higher Mythic Plus comps. But you also do have damage, and I think that with Ascendance, you know, nothing has really changed too much for Shaman. They're getting basically a tier set bonus that gives you your Storm Elemental all the time, which means you're getting that ramping cast speed. You can see I have 4 stacks of my ramping cast speed here, even though my Elemental is on cooldown. Sorry. So you're going to be having that extra haste like all the time from your Storm Ele. Unfortunately, you are going to be, I would say, pigeonholed into a couple of builds. You're not likely to ever play a fire build. That the meatball build is still dead in the water. But again, for this build, you're going to have that ramped up cast speed on your lightning spells all the time. I think Tempest is hitting really hard. Ascendance feels good. Getting procs from Deeply Rooted still feels amazing. Like it's Ele Shaman in a nutshell. Nothing has really changed there, but the damage is solid, and both in AoE and single target's lacking a little bit compared to some of the other guys like Fire Mage. I think that's why Fire Mage kind of gets pushed above, but the AoE damage is very strong, and you can carry your team with that. And then of course you bring the utility like Bloodlust, and of course the mastery buff for Ele. So I think Ele is in a great spot. I think it could potentially get moved into the meta comp if depending on what they're looking for, right? If they need the mastery buff, if they need bloodlust, that kind of thing, you can do as much damage as any of these other guys that are in this row, but you also bring those extra buffs, so you've got some additional value. This is why BM Hunter kind of falls to the bottom of this part of the list, if that makes sense. So that's where Ele Shaman is. I think it's in a really good spot. Okay, let me talk about Affliction and Demo Warlock. I think both of them deserve to go probably in the A tier or even a little bit lower. Now, it's not because they're necessarily bad. Affliction Warlock actually just got buffed. They got kind of turbo buffed. Their single target damage got buffed. Kalamazi was talking about this on his stream. I've watched a lot of his stuff and his tier list and why he has put things where he's put them. And his Warlock stuff he's put basically into this category or a little bit lower. The thing with Demonology Warlock is that everybody's kind of playing Destruction Warlock. I'll talk about that in a second. Every single key that I've seen Destruction Warlock being played, not Demo, not AF. I have no real tangible evidence for either of these specs because I just haven't seen them on the PTR. But Affliction Warlock is looking to be in a good spot. I don't think you should rate this poorly, especially with the single target buff. It's just that its cooldowns, it's kind of cooldown reliant. So you get you send all of your cooldowns onto the target, and then they take a ton of damage. Let's say you're in an AoE pack and like they die. Your next pack afterwards, you're waiting for all your cooldowns to come back, and you do very little damage outside of those cooldowns. So that's the problem for Affliction Warlock. I think in the higher keys where mobs last a lot longer, there's a chance that you'll get more value there, similar to Shadow Priest, right? So we'll have to wait and see how that kind of turns out. And then Demo Warlock is like fine. Nothing really bad has happened to Demo at all. It's just that I don't think a lot of people are going to end up playing it, and I don't really have any additional footage or evidence to support how good this thing actually is. It's a little bit of an unknown quantity in my opinion. So I'm just going to put them here for now. Now, Destro Warlock, I do have a bunch of footage of, and I'm going to put it up in the S tier. I think it is the other ranged that deserves to be up here and will likely see play in almost every single composition. Now, there was a bug with Channel Demon Fire that needed to get fixed, and I believe it did end up getting fixed. So we'll have to see kind of how that shakes out. But even with the nerf that came through, the actual damage from this spec is incredible. And you just saw the AoE pack back there. It was pumping a lot of damage. Like, basically, every time I was pumping damage on my Ele Shaman, the Warlock was like either tied with me or doing more damage than me. And in fact, it was almost... And then on the packs, when I didn't have any cooldowns, they were still doing more damage than me because they were somehow pumping. Once again, you can see they're doing more damage than me here. I think we're going to fight for first place on the damage meters, but Destro Warlock is doing a ton of AoE damage. I think the only real problem for them is their single target is a little bit lower than something like a Fire Mage, then maybe say a Boomkin, but their AoE damage, their consistent AoE damage more than makes up for it. All the Channel Demon Fire stuff looks really fun to play as well. I think their tier set is one of the most exciting tier sets out there. And again, just the damage from Destro is quite strong. Quite strong. Also, they have definitely more utility when it comes to the pets. This is one of the problems with, say, Demonology Warlock and why it gets rated a little bit lower, is because you have to end up taking a Felguard, which means you can't take some of the other pets that'll give you like a kick or the Dispel, the Purge, like that kind of thing, right? Whereas Destro has access to whatever pets they want because they're not reliant on it for their damage. So there you go. That is where that goes there. And this is my list, guys. That is the final tier list for the ranged DPS going into season 2. I think this is fairly accurate. And again, I'm trying to be honest about the specs that I'm even biased towards, which would be, you know, Ele Shaman and Marksman Hunter. I do think Marksman Hunter is like way better than people think it is. I promise you, it's going to be a lot better than people think it is. I think these guys could all end up being in the meta somewhere. I don't think that any of these are bad enough that they wouldn't make it into the meta comp. I think these two are very likely to always be in the meta comp now, if you're talking about like a ranged meta comp. I have two different things here. So we're talking about potential Mythic Plus comps really quickly. If you're talking about a ranged Mythic Plus comp, I think it could look something like this. You could have Vengeance Demon Hunter, Ele Shaman, Destro, Fire Mage, and Discipline Priest. The Ele Shaman, of course, is there for the Bloodlust. You've got a Battle Res with your Warlock. Your Fire Mage has got the Int buff. Your Disc Priest has the Stamina buff, and of course, PI and the Mind Soothe. And then the Vengeance Demon Hunter is buffing everybody's damage by bringing the magic damage debuff to the enemies. This is definitely something that could work here in Mythic Plus. Again, you could probably substitute in the Boomkin to go here as well, and maybe you get rid of the Destro Warlock. I do think that Boomkin can actually get pretty close to being on that level. Again, these are the different tiers of everything here, and then this is the composition that I think it could work with. So this is probably something that you're looking at here. I think any one of these characters could, again, slot into the potential Bisc comp. You could bring a Shadow Priest, but then you probably have to drop the Discipline Priest, and maybe you bring like a Mistweaver Monk or something. That would be a little bit weirder, but again, I think this is a very solid ranged DPS composition that you could end up seeing. Very likely this is what it's going to end up looking like at the end of the day. You could also potentially, instead of an Ele Shaman, you could bring a BM Hunter if you wanted that, but again, he wouldn't benefit from the magic damage debuff. So potentially something like this. I think for a melee comp, you could genuinely see something like Prod Warrior, Mistweaver, Enhance Arms, and Feral, or you could do you could swap out Mistweaver and you could do Brewmaster instead, and then bring in, let's say, a Discipline Priest or something to kind of fill out that comp. But I do think genuinely that the range comp is going to look something like this when it comes to the meta. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. That is my tier list for the range DPS. I think that this is where everybody kind of lands. We'll see if more patch notes end up coming out before the season actually starts, which is coming up on March 4th. So stay tuned for that. But thank you guys so much again for watching. I love y'all. I'll see you in the next one.